Hello everybody, welcome to the Candlelit Tales podcast. I'm sitting down with my sister Sorka.
And I'm sitting down with my brother Aaron.
We are a bit late with this month's podcast. Apologies about that. Look, we're in a shoffice, we're getting our stuff together. We're not even in an office, we're in a shed office.
Yeah, listen, stop. Don't denigrate my shed office.
It's a great office. It has sound keepable, inable material all around us.
Anyway, we're late. The point is, we were late.
We're late, and the word is insulation. Anyway, so we are a little bit late because we've been pretty busy. We've got loads of stuff on.
Been mad busy. We've had so much on. Oh my God.
We've loads more on. Now, we won't bore you with the details because this podcast is all about telling stories to listeners who wants to hear a story going into work or out of work or on to sleep, whatever you want to do with these stories yourself. So we're determined to make this a story and not a marketing pitch for our shows. That said, keep up to date with what we're doing. We have loads of stuff coming on in Puka Festival up in Meath and Louth in November. We're in Westville as well, which is going to be great. We have a great gig down in Cork coming up in October as well. Loads of stuff to be talking about. So keep up to date with us on Facebook, or if you want to join our mail campaign, you can drop us an email as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, the reason that we're kind of having, I guess, a little bit of difficulty with keeping up with the podcast schedule is just as we are currently doing this pretty much for free.
And full time, really. We're doing everything full time.
We're doing it full time. So it's just kind of a case of trying to find a balance between work that pays and work that we're passionate about. And unfortunately, at the moment, if stuff comes up that is a paid gig, we kind of have to prioritise that.
So basically, it's just hard to prioritise making these podcasts, but we want that, and we want to make sure we get ones out. We want to aim for getting a weekly one out, and we're looking forward. That's the goal. We're looking forward to doing something very special in November, where we do a 5-part series.
Yeah.
So tune in then. We'll be on about it again. We'll be telling the tone over 5 parts, which we did exactly 5 years ago, which is very exciting.
Which we'll tell you about closer to the time. It'll be very exciting. But
anyway.
It's basically, if you wanna help us out to get those more regular podcasts, you can find us on patreon.com/candlelit tales.
You can also type in Candlelit into Google and you'll probably find the podcast.
Listen. That's all this is Candlelit Blah.
Candlelit Blah.
Candlelit Blah.
So if you like more Candlelit Blah, please tune in. We are very excited about this month's podcast. This story specifically is one of my favourites.
Yeah. I get to fight with Aaron about it.
Well, that's not the most important thing.
Yes, it is.
But there was
the most important thing to me.
Kind of a special reason I wanted to tell you this story.
Yeah. We'll find out. Aaron, just if it's not an oxymoron, shut up and tell us the story.
There was once a fisherman who lived by the sea in the north of Ireland. He was always happy when he was looking out at the waves, although it often made him sad as well. His mother had told him as a child all of the stories of the sea people, the great kelpies, the horse that would run over the waves and become a man and lure beautiful women to their death and drown them, steal them away. Or the fear darag, the little fat red men, like fat rats they were, might come out at night and steal people away as well. She told him stories of the merrows as well, the sharp-teethed merrow folk who sang to sailors, sang them to lure them into the seas so they could drown them down and eat their flesh. She told him all about Manannán Mac Lir, the king of the sea, the god of the ocean, the son of the ocean himself, that great primordial god that was older than the rest of the Tua De Danann, the people of the goddess Danu. He had the power of the sea in his hand as he wielded the great sword of Fragrach, the Answerer, and rode the great maned horse Eanfar over the waves, leaping and jumping across waves as tall as cliffs, and riding as if over a field of barley, jumping through the waters. But of all the stories of the sea, this fisherman used to love asking his mother about the Selkies. You see, as a young woman, she told him she'd been very alone and very sad, and often would go to a small bay and sing her sorrow to the sea. And the sea, she felt, would sing back to her in a way no one else would ever do. Then she went one night to the bay, and she sang her sorrowful song to the sea, and she wept 3 tears that dropped off the rock she was leaning over and landed into the sea, her salt and the tears mixing with the salt in the sea. Then she looked up, and she had seen the head of a seal with bright black eyes peering at her. The moonlight glimmered over the waves, and when she looked back, she saw a tall man standing there with rippling muscles, dark skin, darker hair, and jet black eyes. His mother had loved to tell him this story, although she never mentioned much about who his father was. People in the town would often comment on the fisherman's dark hair, dark skin, and dark eyes, but he never paid any heed to what people talked about. He only cared for his family, and when his wife died, he went to the sea. And he was sad looking out at the waves, but somehow he also felt held in the great, deep, dark expanse. And when he was walking along the coast one night, he saw, and he couldn't believe his eyes, a woman dancing in the bright shimmering light of the stars and moon above. She was moving with such grace he could not believe it, and on the ground he saw her silky skin, the skin that she would have to put on to then jump back into the sea and return into her seal form. The man thought of his children and how they needed a mother and how he needed a partner, and so he grabbed the Selkie skin and kept it with him. He walked towards the woman, and she, now knowing that he had her Selkie skin, fell to her knees. He told her he would take her as his wife if she would let him. She responded that this was the way it must be now that he had her Selkie skin. He tried to reassure her that he would love her utterly and completely from that moment forward. She was one of the most beautiful women he'd ever seen. Her skin seemed like ivy, her dark hair fell around her shoulders, and her deep, dark eyes penetrated his and seemed to have the wealth of sadness that the ocean held in its depths as well. But she came back to his home, and when she saw his 2 beautiful children, a young girl and a young boy, she poured her heart into the caring of them, and she was a beautiful mother for them, and she sang them to sleep that first night. When the fisherman woke up the following day, the house was cleaned like it had never been cleaned before. He swore he could see his reflection in the door. She cooked him meals, and he was amazed at her grace and her beauty and her poise. And oftentimes the house was filled with so much laughter it seemed to near break the windows. But after a while, the fisherman could see the dark rings around the woman's eyes were returning every month when the moon was bright and gleaming off the sea. She would go and sing sad songs to the ocean around her. He knew she wanted to go back to the ocean. but he had her Selkie cloak and she could not go back without it. He knew he had her held captive. So one night, when she was singing her sad song, though it broke his heart, he walked towards her and offered her Selkie cloak, saying if she really wanted to go, she should be allowed to go. He looked back at the house where the two children were sleeping now soundly, and hoping he might convince her with one last plea, he saw that she had taken the Selkie skin and wrapped it around her and leapt off the great rock and dove into the ocean, changing form into the seal that she was before he had ever met her. In this form she moved so quickly and fast around the sea waves, she at last came up and he could see her head. She ducked back down beneath the waves. And he always stayed watching the waves, watching and waiting if he might catch a glimpse of the Selkie that might return to his shore. He would watch and he would wait as his children grew and grew up and went and left their home. And oftentimes he'd be vacant when his children visited him, simply looking out at the ocean, wishing to catch a glimpse of his Selkie. One day when the children came back, there was no one in the house. There was no one around, and no one had heard a sound or a sight of the fisherman anymore. Some people say he dove into the sea to drown his sorrows, but some people say that his Selkie returned to him, and she had made him a cloak of his own. So he joined her in the deep, dark sea, swimming around Ireland forever.
I like what you did with that story. That was a bit of a reinvention.
Yeah, well, I guess it was. There's a lot of different sources on Selkie stories, so it was nice to just, I guess, take a few ingredients and make it into that Candlelit Tales narrative, I guess.
Because this is a conversation that we've had a couple of times in Candlelit Tales, in terms of like folktale, mythology, what the difference is, where we draw the line. But you wanted to tell the Selkie story particularly for a particular reason, didn't you?
I did, yeah, I did.
Go on, so why now? Why Selkies?
Okay, so to answer this, I guess I gotta give a little bit of frame of reference. Bill Murray took me swimming in April of 2019, and it was cold as hell, but it was engaging, and I just got addicted to swimming in the sea. So I've been swimming in the sea, as much as I can this year, and I've just been going down wherever I can. I just have the togs and a towel and I jump in. So I went down to Killiney Beach, excuse me, and I got in. I was swimming for about 10-15 minutes, just down towards Bray Head there, and I was just enjoying the swim, and well, a seal popped up really close to me, and like as close as a width of a car, let's say, a metre or so, and I just like that. There's a seal, and my brain started to almost tell this story. Like I can't wait to tell someone I saw a seal this close. And so anyway, I swam a bit more. He popped around on the other side of me, and I was like, okay, this seal is not actually going away. Like I wonder what's going to happen. So I swam back the way, and I was going slower because I was against the tide. And this seal basically played hide and go seek. He just started popping up and having a look at me, and then I'd sense him close, and then it was amazing because he even brushed my feet, and I got a little bit of a chill of like, oh wow. Dear.
When you're in the ocean and something brushes your feet, that's not a terribly comfortable feeling.
And I was in his domain,
Mm-hmm.
and or hers, I'm actually really not sure. It was bigger than me, and his head was bigger, and I opened my eyes under the water to have a look, and he moved so gracefully under the water. I could see the belly, kind of grey, and it just swam so smoothly and slick, and then as if it was just like laughing at me, kind of on his back, poked his nose out of the sea, and was just kind of, breathing, looking at me, going, "Is this as fast as you can go, you absolute useless fecker?" Like, so I could just keep on swimming, just with a grin on my face, like just kind of taking it all in. And when he brushed my feet again, I just kind of had a mental kind of going, "Okay, he's like a dog. Like seals have been known to bite people, but so have dogs." So I was like, "Okay, don't act aggressively, just be sound." And I kind of popped my eyes open again underneath the water if he brushed my legs, and see him swimming away just like a dog would when he comes up to you. So I was just fascinated when he came up to me again. I saw the big eyelashes of him, like huge, really dark eyes, really features that's like a face. And I was getting cold. I was in the water for about half an hour at this stage, and as I was walking out waist high, I kind of looked back and was wondering where he was. And I swear to God, he looked up and he splashed his fin back and he waved goodbye. And he popped into the water. And as I was getting changed, I was looking at the water and he did not come back up.
He saw you get out.
Yeah.
He was like, "All right, playtime over.
Playtime over.
Fuck off and get some food now."
Yeah.
Nice one.
Yeah. So
that's such a cool encounter.
Yeah.
And that's such a, for those who don't know, the Irish Sea is quite cold to swim in, even kind of in the summer.
Yeah, even in July.
It's a cold sea, so you don't stay in for very long. But seals can be so playful, and it's such a lovely kind of engagement to have with a wild thing.
So of course I've been obsessed. I've been looking up. I've been calling it my swim with the Selkie,
Totally.
Because I can really see the human characteristics and aspects and personalities that I would project upon it. Having the game, having the, even thinking how slow I'm going.
The playfulness of animals. I think when you see that kind of playfulness in an animal, it really makes me kind of rethink how we define humanity. Mm-hmm. Because there's something about that kind of sense of humour. And I'm sure some people could argue that it's 100% projection, but I think emotionally we know that it's not.
Yeah.
That when there's a non-human creature that's engaging with you on an emotional, joyful level like that, it's really gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it's really gorgeous to be open to it. So I wanted the funny thing, because I was kind of basically the thing is, right, we've had this kind of conversation in Candlelit Tales a couple of times about sort of mythology versus folklore.
Right.
And we've generally, just for listeners who haven't overheard all of those conversations to date.
Thankfully they haven't.
Well, we're told we're quite entertaining when we argue. So
toot your own horn there for you, don't you?
Not everybody has listened in on all of those conversations. A lot of the other guys in Candlelit Tales have.
Yeah, true.
Or have been part of them. And what we kind of came down on about a year or two ago was to stop telling folktales as much and to stick with the mythology more.
Yeah.
So it was kind of funny to me because Aaron sent me a message saying I really want to tell a Selkie story on the podcast. Can I? And of course this was after he told me the story of his swim with the Selkie. And so I was like, well, you fucker, I can't say no now, because I'm hesitant to use the word superstition.
Right.
But I definitely have a respect for the other world, which I think is healthy. I think it's good to have. I was up at Loch Crew this summer with a group of students from California Polytechnic, and one of them sat in the Cailleach's chair, and I was like, ooh, Jesus, careful now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't presume. And he was the one got pulled up to do Irish dancing that evening. And he was not happy about it. So there's definitely a part of me that's belief is a strong word.
Sure.
But at the same time, I would not refuse a Selkie story after an encounter with the Selkie, because that would be disrespectful.
Absolutely.
Of whatever is going on there. So I actually, initially my reaction was for fuck's sake, Talk about pulling rank.
Well, I guess again, we've defined ourselves as a as a storytelling troupe that specialises or retells Irish mythology and focuses in on the deeper ingrained stories that have lasted in a culture, and that's the mythology and the mythos of a culture. Folktales have a unique, a separate identity to myth.
Yes. But there's also quite a considerable overlap, and there are myths that are folky, and there are folk stories that have very deep kind of resonances and meanings to them. So it's kind of what I ended up landing on after my initial reaction of fuck's sake was let's argue that out on the podcast.
Yeah.
Like, let's actually have this discussion and let's involve the listeners.
Absolutely.
In terms of saying, like, okay, so these are folktales. We're going to talk about some of the kind of themes in the Selkie story that we'd see. We're going to talk about some of the differences and how, like, because it's a grey area, isn't it, to define?
It is.
But we'll talk that out a little bit, and then I kind of want to hear from people listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
Like, if you like folktales, let us know.
Yeah.
If you like sticking to mythology, let us know. If you like both, let us know.
And thank you for those of you who have been in touch of late. It's actually really, really encouraging what people have been saying and getting in touch with. So just thank you for touching base with us, because it does mean a lot. And I guess what I did with this story, again, like, I love telling stories and I love compiling them and I love listening to other tellers. And these are, between them, or in and around, I listen to a lot of British Isles stories. I listen to and read stories from Scotland, because there's an awful lot of Selkie and Merrow stories based in Scotland.
Strictly speaking, the Selkie story is a Scottish story. Like, if you wanted to be strict about it, which we don't, because obviously Aaron met an Irish Selkie, so
Absolutely.
Again, bit of respect. But strictly speaking, the tradition comes from, I think, the Orkney Islands and the Shetland Islands in Scotland.
Right.
That's where the Selkie story originates from. But there's versions of this all over the world. And the Irish version of it is more the Merrow, or the Weidenwara, which is the woman of the sea.
Yeah.
And then you also get, I don't know if it's a Native American or an American one, but I've heard one, there's a crane wife. In fact, there was a band called the Decemberists that made an album about the crane wife, which is, again, it's a Selkie type story.
Well, there's an African version as well. Actually, one of the guys in the Direct Vision group that was doing this land, they were talking about the basically a seal Selkie story. It was going to the cliffs in Africa, seeing these seals and jumping in and enjoying them. So it was very, going away with it.
There you go. Like, there's versions of that story in a lot of different cultures. And I think that's interesting. But tell us more about how you decided to construct this, because, so the general form of it is man sees beautiful woman of the sea, whether she's a crane or a Selkie or a Merrow. She has some object that allows her to transform or to breathe under the water or to fly away, which he steals and hides from her. Mm-hmm. And in some versions of the stories, he tries to destroy it, which usually ends up killing her. They have many years of happy marriage and lots of kids. She's an ideal wife. And then one day she finds the artifact and she is gone without a backward glance.
Yeah.
And that's the pattern of the story.
So, again, I guess the reason I was so drawn to the Selkie story, obviously, I had a recent experience of swimming with a Selkie, which helps. But it's always pulled on a chord, maybe. And the Song of the Sea was a beautiful way of constructing that story into an Irish kind of narrative as well, which is a beautiful animation by Cartoon Saloon, which I have, watched and cried at lots of times. I'm a crier. But it's so, I think it does resonate with something, because it has that explore into the wildness, go into nature, go into the vast, vast ocean, which is timeless. So this feeling has been timeless, and you're kind of resonating with something there anyway. And the seals are those guys that come on land and play in the sea, and they just have that little bit of crossover
Well, they're already magical because they're liminal, because they cross borders.
Absolutely.
And any creature that crosses borders like that is kind of mythically, symbolically important, one way or another. You know.
And so, you know, me being me, I just listened to loads of stories on YouTube, and I read a rake of them online last night as well, and just to kind of to get my head around it as well, just to kind of look at all the crossovers. And you know, there's a beautiful like Tale Foundation talk about, you know,
Tale Foundry.
Tale Foundry, sorry, yeah, hashtag make stuff up,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
keep making stuff up.
They have a great series on Irish mythology on their YouTube channel. And looking at the kind of gaps in Irish mythology, the wide open spaces, which is really nice.
But like this idea of keep making stuff up is like that's all that storytellers are doing, is like you're just joining dots. And so I kind of I stuck the a story about a woman, because there's male and female Selkies, and there's male and female Merrows, and there's the Merrows seem to be darker and vicious and lure you off and might
Well,
maybe
Merrows and mermaids are a little bit carnivorous. They can be a little bit wilder. There was a funny thing in the Irish tradition where the male Merrows are quite ugly looking, but can be quite fond of the drink. So they've got little red eyes and piggy noses, but like they'd be good company if you can get them drunk. If you've enough drink to get them drunk, because they've a high tolerance. But the female Merrows are quite beautiful, which is why the female Merrows will often, you know, fall for a fisherman, because the fisherman is better looking than whatever's in the sea. Like.
Yeah.
A bit of an upgrade, like.
Well, and then this whole idea of, you know, the Lady of Galaras, this these stories where a fisherman will see a beautiful woman, steal her the Selkie skin or the Selkie cap, as they call it in Scotland, and keep it and hide it, and then she's their wife, and she's good at cooking and looking after the kids, and she's famous for being a really good housewife. But the wildness is always in her, you know, and so if she ever finds the cap, she fecks off and she's gone.
Which I think, like, to me, that's what's fascinating about this folklore type, particularly this set of stories that's around in a lot of different cultures, that is talking about, you know, wild women. And I think it's really interesting, like, in our culture, in a lot of cultures today, it is sort of assumed that the highest love that any woman can have is for her children. And you have this whole body of folklore that's going, well, not necessarily. There are women for whom there is a higher love. And for me, that says something really profound about, like, whether that love is for freedom or for themselves or for, you know, something deeper. It is enough to pull them completely away. And it is enough for that wildness to just come right back out. And, like, there's no version, we talked about many versions, but there is no version of this story where she stays with him and they die of old age. Is there?
Absolutely not. No.
Like, it is only ever a temporary situation.
There are versions where he joins her in the sea sometimes, or some say, and that just again goes to that evocative escapism that we all have, going back into the wild, going back into the sea, you know, releasing yourself from the human condition and the human mind, and going into going into
a shapeshift and going into a different form. And actually, that type of story, that type of ending, reminds me of the Angus Oak story.
Absolutely.
Which we told way back in episode whatever the heck it was. You know, that that's a story of him going to meet her where she is. Yeah. Rather than trying to pull her out into where she doesn't want to be. Because there's also something about, like, you know, a seal can't live on dry land. And wildness
can't exist in a domestic setting, you know. And you know, Richard Thompson's Bee's Wing.
Yes.
Let's just take it clear, you know, it's Richard Thompson's.
Yeah, it was covered by several people, but it's Richard Thompson's song. He wrote it. Yeah, it's a gorgeous song. Look it up if you're not familiar with it. But it's a song about, again, that type of woman who is not interested in domesticity. And in the case of that song, she just outright refuses him and says, you know, a nice little bit of land and babies on the rug sounds like hell. I'm staying wild. Fuck off. Yeah. And that's kind of the draw always,
is to try and domesticate wildness. You know, we try and do that. We try and put fences around wild areas and keep it, and it just makes sense sometimes. We're drawn to try and have some kind of form of wildness in our life, but we need to keep it kind of nice and calm and relaxed. We can't go full native, like.
Well, also, I think there's something there. Again, for me, it comes back to a bit of respect.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you had that beautiful moment of play with that seal. How cool would it be if you could have a pet seal that goes swimming with you every time you go down?
Yeah, but then you're...
On one level, wonderful. But on another level, it's not your seal anymore then.
Free Willy. Free Willy.
Like, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's I think that impulse to possess something wild and beautiful is something that we kind of, as human beings, have to be a bit careful of. Because we can, and we have, divided up the world and fenced it all in. And in some ways, you know, the most beautiful places that are left to us. I was up at the Giant's Causeway recently, which is a beautiful, wild place. But part of the reason for its beauty is there's no building there. You know, there's a kind of a visitor centre, but when you actually go out to the place, there's nothing built there. But it's because you can't build on that. Because, you know, the wild places, and you think of like deserts, and you think of mountaintops, and you think of like deep, dark forests. The wild places are the places that are hostile to us.
Yeah.
They're actually the places that we can't live. And there's something about the kind of incompatibility of human civilization with wildness.
Oh, yeah.
And how that stirs a kind of a poignancy and a grief.
Yes, there is a certain, like, a sadness to that, but also great euphoria in kind of like seeing this beautiful seal in his domain. As I was thinking I was doing great with my swimming, realised how crap I am designed.
There's nothing makes you feel more like a big lumbering ox than seeing a sea creature in its actual habitat, while we are just splashing around there like a big naked gorilla.
Wasn't fully naked, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, like hairless naked. You know what I mean? Like,
so this is where I'm kind of like conflicted a little bit, because for me, mythology and folk tales are they're different classes, and I guess we found out kind of, you know, around Samhain time, and for Halloween here we did a number of years where we just did folk tales, because then you have the puka story, then you have the stories of the animals, the headless horseman, you know, all of the stories of
the vampire, what is she again? The Jarag Dhu.
Jarag Dhu, yeah, and we've all these amazing kind of creatures and monsters, bump in the night type folk tales, and the fairies stealing people away and all that kind of stuff. And they were superstitions. They kept superstitions alive. In Ireland, they lasted a very long time to kind of keep a level of magic in the realm of before everything became scientific and
the realm of the everyday.
Yeah, and they're always changing. Folk tales are always kind of alive. And they're kind of moulding and being recreated. In the last 100 years, maybe less so. I would say a lot less so.
No. I think anybody who tells a folk tale tells it and makes it their own.
Yes.
And I think that is one of the great things about them. And like, we use folk tales when we're teaching storytelling to people as well. Because it's the case of like, here is the story of the King of Cats.
Yes.
Now tell it back to me your own way.
# we teach storytelling.
Yeah, just in case anybody's interested in learning how to be a storyteller. Drop us a line. But, yeah, mention our podcast for a discount. Sorry, just kidding. But because they're so malleable, because they are adaptable in that way, because you can put yourself into a folktale and say, this happened to me. But you know what I noticed when we did all those stories at Samhain?
Yeah.
Nobody was crying.
No.
Nobody was crying by the end of the show. And to me, that, like, okay, that says a lot about me as a storyteller.
Also, the raucous laughter wasn't overly there. The emotionality was dialed down.
It was muted.
Yeah.
And I think, like, for me, the reason for that, and where I draw the distinction, is that in mythology, you have personalities.
Yeah.
And you have very complex, interesting characters who have these great depth of personality.
They're archetypes. They're huge.
Yeah, they're huge, and they're not black and white. They are complex characters. Sometimes they do good stuff. Sometimes they do terrible stuff, and it can come from the same person. And they have, it's the character and the personality that makes the difference for me. Because in folktales,
actually,
your hero is...
Before you tell that, can you just explain to me and to our listener what an archetype is, like a cultural archetype?
I think we've gone through this before, but it's an idea from Jung, and kind of Jungian analysts would still use it, that there is a collective unconscious in humanity, that there is a way that we have of seeing the world, and that there are certain things that are common to us. So archetypal personalities from mythology being one of those. Now, this is disputed.
Yeah.
But, and it might not be, his explanation might not be exactly accurate, but for me, it's something that is resonant across different cultures. Like, if you look at the archetype of the hero, the one who goes out there and, like, wins the day, every culture has a hero. The hero will look different, and the hero will behave differently. And some of them are more collaborative, and some of them are more individualistic, and some of them are strong, and others are clever.
Yeah,
and that'll all depend.
Hercules, or you've Cuchulainn, or you've what's your man, Troy, Achilles.
Achilles. Yeah. Well, they're all kind of from the same area of the world, really. But you have, they're all European.
Well, I mentioned, true. I was like, Cuchulainn is in Greece or Rome.
Yeah.
But yeah.
They're pretty.
I just don't know the names of the Asian lads or the African ones or the South American ones, but there's definitely those ones there.
Well, do you know what? The oldest one is the trickster archetype. Everybody has a trickster.
Okay.
We have Manannán and MacLear. The Native Americans have coyote. You have lots of, you have the trickster archetypes. I can't remember the name of the Japanese one, but I remember it. I looked up a story about him before. So you have these characters, and they kind of are patterns. And it might just be that the human mind has a way of seeing things, and we tend to organize information into stories, and we tend to organize it into different story patterns and types. But whatever it is, there's a kind of a connectivity and a depth to mythology that I don't find is there with folktale. Yeah, which is why I'm more ambivalent about doing them.
Because for me, again, what happens in folktales is the what and the when, but not the who. Not about the actual characters.
You'll also get a lot of where.
Yeah.
You'll get a lot of emphasis on place, because in a lot of folktales it's very important that it happened here, or it happened around the corner from here, because a lot of them are very, very localised.
And not so long ago, and my mother said this, and this kind of thing, like, and you're putting locales.
There was a man in this area, and this was his name. Like, they're very localised and they're very specific in version, but actually the story of them is all around the world. Like, you'll find that Selkie story that absolutely happened right here, but one with a tiny variation happened absolutely right there.
Yeah.
And so on all around the world. So that's why I have an ambivalence around telling folktales.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a different thing.
Yeah.
And like, your construction of essentially an original Selkie story, which we just heard, is again different from what we do with the myths. Yeah. Now, not completely, because we do play with the myths and we find different ways of telling them, but we don't invent to the same degree.
True.
And
you can't stick a start on to, like, what we do with the myths is we take leaps and we put in stepping stones, but we generally join dots from missing information, because there's huge, vast quantities of information, and they can roughly say the same thing in different versions of different older texts.
A lot of the times you will get a myth that is very sketchy in detail, and we'll fill in those details.
Exactly.
But we won't do what you did there, where you give it an original ending. We will colour within the lines. For the most part, whereas you don't need to do that with folktales. So that's why I'm like.
And I will take you up on saying original ending, because I don't actually think there is.
Well, you're right. Original is not the word, but like that's an ending that is an invented ending that you came up with.
Sure.
So that's where my hesitation about including folktales under the kind of umbrella of candlelit tales comes in. And like, it's not that they're bad stories. It's not that there's anything wrong with folktales. It's just that to me they're a different thing.
True.
And they're a different kettle of fish.
And so I'd like to hear from our listeners. I hope you've enjoyed this chat, by the way.
Yeah. This is one that is actually genuinely, as Aaron said, it's great to hear from people. And like, I know I don't really contact people online because they're just voices on my phone. And it feels weird to contact them as if I knew them. But like, it's actually really nice for us to hear back from you guys.
Yeah.
What you liked and what you didn't like. Comments, criticism, any of that stuff, because it kind of also gives us a feeling that we're not just talking to ourselves.
No, and that's why we're keeping on doing this, because we've gotten so many people come up to us and saying it at gigs, as well as the odd email here and stuff there. So online, so thank you for all those. I'd like to invite you more to get involved with this debate about whether or not you'd like to hear us tell more folktales, because there's rakes of them, and I do love them. I do have a very fondness for them. I do find myths, I'm more drawn to the stronger archetypes and the stuff we talked about today as well. But maybe people just want to sit back and relax and explore what kind of is evoked out of the little folktales that makes the changeling story make sense in a culture where there was a lot of messed up stuff with kids being left in forests because they thought they were a fairy, even though they were just a little bit autistic maybe. And when we didn't understand medical procedures fully, these folktales stood in place to keep superstitions alive, to maybe uneducate people. But
they have a dark history in Ireland in terms of horrific acts of child abuse. But in terms of coming in as an explanation, absolutely, that was not a rational one. Whatever rational means. But listen, let us know what you think. You can contact us on the social media things, which would be info@candlelittales.ie if you want to use the email address either. Or Instagram.
Candlelit Tales.
Facebook. Candlelit Tales.
Twitter. Candlelit Tales.
Twitter, we're at Candlelit Tales. So any of those things, and if you want to use hashtag Candlelit Tales podcast, all one word, that'll help us kind of find yous.
Hashtag keep our candle lit. And
Aaron's really trying to get that one to catch on.
It's going to work. It's going to work.
It's going to get there. It's going to work.
No, we've seen some people on Twitter, so thank you very much for all that. This podcast was produced and edited by Oisín Ryan. Thank you, Oisín. You're always doing loads of work, because the music was also done by Oisín Ryan. And yes, thank you very much for including a little bit extra that I asked for this one. Now, the story was by moi, but the universe really, because there was loads of versions in that one.
Yeah, this story was co-authored by Aaron and his seal friend. So we would like to extend a great deal of respect and gratitude to Aaron's seal friend.
Yeah, I'll be swimming and looking out for him
or
her. Does anyone know how you tell the difference between a male and female Selkie?
I mean,
I'm gonna call it Selkies now.
I think we're just gonna have to live with the ambiguity, Aaron.
I'm okay with it.
You were flirting with a seal.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it.
Whichever kind of seal it was, it's not gonna make it less weird.
No, probably not. Listen, we've lots of stuff going online or ongoing with our live shows. Follow us online. See us on candlelittales.ie. We're in Whelan's in the end of August, main space. We're also making it down to Cork, Kilkenny, and really looking forward to going to the Boyne for the Salmon of Knowledge Festival. So that's all coming up very soon. And keep in touch, and if you want to get in touch online, info@candlelittales.ie. I think I've said everything.
I think you've said everything. You can also book us for a Candlelit Tales show, and most importantly, if you like what we're doing, you can give us encouragement verbally, but you can also give us encouragement, financially, for the rent. And if you would like to do that, go to patreon.com/Candlelit Tales, and we would be very, very thankful to you.
Yes, and thank you already for our amazing patrons. You're absolutely helping loads. We're able to buy some equipment. We're putting a little nest egg together for to get lights for our live shows, which is just great. We're getting another recorder just to record our live shows as well. So that's all great. Listen, that's enough, guys. Find us on Patreon and or don't, because even if you don't, listen to this for free and share it. That'd be great. Just thumbs up.
Share it.
And,
tell everyone about it.
Enough
well, I mean,
tonight.
to be honest, if they don't like it, would they still be listening at this point?
Definitely not.
Like, yeah, no.
They
You like
would.
it, lads. You know you like it.
If you listen to this far,
just
sound.
share it.
Yeah. Sound.
You
be
know
sound.
it.
Yeah,
Share it.
Yeah. You.